Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I would ask everyone to stay muted for the sake of the presenter throughout this presentation. We have muted you, but I would also ask again that you stay muted. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us today for Ask the Expert session. This is our 8th Ask the Expert session. Previously, we've had 2 HR sessions with Joanna Forbes. We've had a food service session with Jeannie Keenan and Sue Geiser, marketing sessions with Cindy Miller and Erica Metzger, identifying goals, objectives, target market, buyer persona by Michaela, and a Facebook makeover by Erica Metzger. Just trying to keep our small business owners in the know. I'm Steve Schillig, the moderator for the workshop today. I'm also the director of the Small Business Development Center, headquartered at Kent State University, Tuscarawas. The Small Business Development Center, if you're not aware, provides confidential and no-charge consulting. We have a team of specialized counselors with backgrounds in marketing, food service, leadership, finance and accounting, QuickBooks and bookkeeping, computer technology, human resources, and business disaster planning, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Those resources, again, are available to you on a confidential and a no-cost basis. Still working on the working remotely, and my technology skills are generally lacking, so I appreciate your patience throughout this process. Again, I have muted everyone for our speakers' benefit. If you have questions, please use the chat room. The chat room can be found in the ribbon below your screen. It is to the left of the phone, and if you hover your mouse, it will read Show Conversation. We wanted to offer this workshop to provide some marketing tips on the reopening, restarting, and maybe even the repositioning of your business and dealing specifically with disaster planning. I'm very pleased to have on the call today Joanna Forbes. Joanna has 20 years of human resource experience in various industries, including healthcare, manufacturing, food and restaurant, service, and nonprofits. The last attendee that just got on, if you could mute yourself, I'd appreciate it thank you for the speaker's benefit. Joanna owns and serves as the chief HR consultant for Forbes Human Resources, a local HR consulting firm, which also serves as she also serves as an HR advisor for the Small Business Development Center. We're very pleased to have her as part of our team. Joanna, through the SBDC, is available for direct assistance. So if you have specific questions that did not get answered today, or you need additional help, please contact me directly. My contact information can be found in the presentation. This session is being recorded. The slides will be emailed to you at the conclusion of the session. Before we start, I'd like to mention our next Ask the Expert session. We're very pleased to have on August 13th at 12 p.m. Jake Ward, and he'll be talking about patent. He's a patent expert, and his presentation will be Keep Calm and Keep Inventing. So mark your calendars now. If you have suggestions on recommendations on other topics or programs, feel free to contact me or mention that in the chat room. Full disclosure, this process is obviously very fluid and changing rapidly. That is why direct assistance may be the best avenue for you and your business. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Joanna.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm excited to be here today. Here's just some useful information that Steve already covered, and I just wanted to point out, again, like Steve said, this information is fluid and it changes daily. For further information on this topic, and I'll give these references again at the end, please visit FEMA, ready.gov, ohio.gov, and OSHA.gov, and any regulatory agencies that are relevant to the industry that you're in, for sure. Okay, so today, for our agenda for today, we're going to talk about what a business disaster is. We're going to talk about a disaster plan or a business continuity plan. We're going to go through the process of creating a business continuity plan. We're going to talk about IT disasters for a couple minutes, and then we're going to finish up with just some quick hits, some things we can do now, and just some final reminders. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to talk about today is, what is a business disaster? And as we all know, we are in the midst of one right now with the COVID-19 global pandemic. So FEMA defines a business disaster as any unplanned event that can cause death or significant injuries to our employees, customers, the public. It disrupts our operations. It causes physical or environmental damage, and it threatens our business's financial standing. So that pretty much hits all the check boxes of the things that we are going through right now. And that's why we're talking about business continuity plans today, because even though we're still in the middle of this disaster, this is a great time to sit down and think, what worked, what didn't work, what do I wish I would have known when we started this process several months ago? What do I wish I would have had written down or documented? So that's why we're talking about this today, while it's still fresh in our mind. So a little bit more about a business disaster again. So it's an unplanned interruption. When we say an unacceptable period of time, we mean longer than we typically plan. You know, it's not the power's out for a day. It's going to be considered an unacceptable period of time. And sometimes we have to have external assistance. You know, we hear about the Red Cross, of course, and FEMA coming in. And these are things that happen during business disasters. And right now with the COVID-19, the Department of Health and the CDC are really who we're looking to, guidance to keep our businesses running. So we are definitely using external assistance to kind of get through this disaster right now. So what are some disaster types that we have to deal with? Now, we know we can't plan for everything, and we may go through our whole professional career and not have to deal with any of those. But everybody on the call today is dealing with one right now. But when we typically think of a disaster, we typically think of environmental disasters. So hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods are typically what we think of and what businesses plan for, what we have insurance for. Biological disasters, though, do fall under that. So that's what we're in the midst of right now. There's also, unfortunately, deliberate disasters. So workplace violence, active shooters, bomb threats, all of those types of things. Utilities, loss of power, or our telephone service or our Wi-Fi, when those things go down, that can definitely be a disaster for our business. If we have our equipment breakdown, if we make a specific product and we have a main piece of equipment that breaks down and we cannot no longer make that product, that's going to be a disaster, especially if we can't get that product replaced anytime soon. Information technology is a huge one, of course, because so much now is what we consider, online or through data or through robots doing the work. All of that can cause a major disaster for our work. And then other things that we may not think about, of course, labor disputes, if we have strikes at the workplace, road closures. For example, if your business is at the end of a bridge and the bridge is closed for a 6-month period, and all of that traffic is no longer coming past your business, coming past your restaurant. That's a lot of traffic that is not seeing your business. That can be a major disaster, especially for a small business. And then another thing would be a loss of your key personnel. If maybe someone retired without giving a lot of notice, or anybody left your organization that was holding key information and we didn't have a succession plan in place, that could be a disaster for a business as well. So why do we need to have a plan? Well, again, we're in the midst of a disaster, and you're probably thinking of some things that maybe you wish you would have known or you would have prepared for ahead of time. So as we're going through these steps today, again, I want you to think about those things and think how maybe we can start organizing those thoughts and all of the things we wish we would have had into some sort of plan. And you'll see what all of those things are here in a minute. But we need a plan because disasters occur. Now, again, we may go through our whole career and not have any of those things happen that we just talked about. But the reality is that they can occur, and they do occur. We're in the middle of one right now. So if we have some sort of plan, Those checklists, that can really help during panic, during chaos. We're not trying to come up and make decisions in the midst of the chaos. We have a plan, and we can stick to that plan. And then we can move forward to continue that essential function of our business because we thought about it before and we have a deliberate way that we're going to do that. And it's very expensive. We're seeing this right now. Loss of sales, loss of customers, loss of vendors, increased material cost, a lot of things, products, contracting business, there's just materials they can't get right now because of COVID-19 for various reasons. Lack of employees, decreased employee productivity. I'm sure some of you may be affected by this, or you may have heard on the news how employers are having a hard time getting their employees to even come back to work because of the unemployment benefits that they were receiving. So that's been an issue that we've been dealing with, and even some of our clients here at the SBDC. So, and that good reputation that you took and made your business as profitable as it was, we don't want to lose that because we could not respond effectively to a disaster. And I want everyone to look at this last bullet for a minute here. Every crisis can be simultaneously financial, ethical, legal, emotional, operational, and political. Does that not check all the boxes for COVID-19 right there? We are definitely hitting all of those boxes with everything that we're going through. Legal, ethical, political for sure, emotional, operational, and definitely financial. So if we were ever in the midst of a disaster and can think about what we need to move forward, it is definitely right now with what all of our businesses are going through. So we know all of those financial reasons, but what are some of the other main reasons? Well, it's safety. It really is safety. When we think about disaster planning, our number one priority is to protect our employees, to protect our customers, our guests, if we're healthcare, our patients, our residents. That's really our number one priority. So we need to have a good, fast, immediate response to disasters because we don't want any injuries. We don't want any death. We don't want any damage. So we're going to try to prevent all of those things. So we want to be prepared for those things to the best that we can. We want to have increased confidence in our business. And really, we want our business to continue when we get through this disaster. FEMA estimates that 40 to 60% of businesses don't recover after they've been through a disaster. So we want to be on the good side of that. So let's start talking then about the plan. We hear business continuity plan, we hear disaster response plans, and really your whole disaster response plan will include pieces of your business continuity plan. Because right now, if you think for a minute, you may already have your fire escape routes, your tornado procedures, you may have a snow day policy for your staff, you may have an active shooter policy, unfortunately. So many businesses have put active shooter policies into place. So all of those pieces right now are going to be part of this disaster response plan that we're going to put together. So a business continuity plan is a comprehensive statement of consistent actions to be taken before, during, and after a disaster. So right now we're still in the during phase. So we want to stick with our actions and we want to stick through it. So it's an ongoing process that helps us improve our chances of survival because that's what we want to do. We don't want to be in that 40, 60%. We want to be in the other half of those numbers. We want to keep our company alive and get through this disaster. So I want you to think for a minute about your business, your organization, and what threats could have a severe negative impact on your organization. Well, it could be all of the things that we already talked about. In Ohio, we might not get hit with too many hurricanes, but we do have our fair share of flooding here in Ohio, tornadoes for sure. And then unfortunately, the things we can't plan for, like the deliberate incidents that we talked about. So we want to think about the preventative measures that we can put in place. We want to think about how we can reduce and stop that damage after. And we really want to think about what parts of our operation need to be returned to service first. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit detail here in a minute. And then we're going to start thinking about the folks at our organization who will be responsible for each part of that recovery. So those are just some of the overall thoughts that we're going to keep in mind as we go through this process. So when we think about the business continuity, this is the cycle that we're in. So that blue circle there at the top, that's normal operations. We're plugging away, we're working hard, and things are great. That was us at the end of 2019, right? We were all plugging around and we were doing good, and COVID was on the news and people were starting to talk about it, but it didn't hit us quite yet. And then the disaster happened. So in mid-March, that was it. Things started closing, the schools started closing, and businesses started closing. So then we came down there to the business disruption, and then that was it. Some folks walked out of their business and closed the door and were not prepared at all. They really had no idea how they were going to even access computer files or get to their employees or their customers or their vendors. So then we had to put our emergency response into play. So that's what we did when we first have our disaster. And then we're going to go through our business continuity plan. That's where we're going to start restoring operations. And that's where we're at right now with COVID-19, because businesses opened back up. And yes, we see on the news all the time with numbers coming up and then businesses maybe closing or opening back up. But that's where we're at right now. So businesses are opening back up. And maybe we're wearing masks and there's not as many tables in the restaurants, and we're doing all of those things that we need to do to be safe. But that's the part that we're in right now until we get back to the top of those normal operations. That's where we want to be, back up there at the top. So we're trying to mitigate that damage, and we're trying to minimize the extent of the disrupted service. So whenever the CDC and the governor put all of the regulations out starting a couple months ago for each industry, we all sat down and we said, okay, I have a restaurant business, so I need to follow all of these protocols because I want my disrupted service to be short. I want to be back up and running and I want to get moving again. So what do I need to do? And that was part of your business continuity plan, even if you didn't think of it at that time. And you also were trying to give a sense of stability for your business, for your customers, for your employees. And again, when we have our plans in place, it reduces that decision making in the middle of an emergency, because that's really what we don't want to do. We want to have our plans in place beforehand. And again, if you don't have any plans right now, that's okay. That's okay, because we're going to work through this. Again, you're going to get all these slides today. There's a lot of information on these slides. But you're going to get all of them. And we can go through each step a little more detail one-on-one as well. So when we can talk about that later. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to start getting down into the nitty-gritty here. So this is a 10-step process. I don't want us to get hung up on the 10 steps. I've seen it written as 5 steps. I've seen it written as 8 steps. I'm just going to take it through today as 10 steps, just as a little bit easier. Some of these things may not be relevant to you on the call today. Some of these things may take you 5 minutes. Some of them may take you a little bit longer. So it all depends on your business, the size of your business, and the industry that you're in. These are going to be general steps, and some things might be a little bit different, again, depending on the business that you're in. And we're going to go through each step in a little bit more detail. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get management support to put this business continuity plan into place. And then we're going to get a team together who's going to work on this. And then we're going to collect all of the data that we need for our business continuity plan. And that's going to be the longest part. And then we're going to look at our operations. And then we're going to talk about our risks. And then we're going to start talking about recovery strategies. Okay, how do we get things back up and moving again? And then we're going to put it all into a nice written document, the old-fashioned way, on paper, right? And then we're going to communicate that plan, and we're going to train our staff, and then we're going to test it, and then we're going to keep it active. We're going to evaluate it, and we're going to update it. We're not going to let it sit on a shelf and collect dust. We're going to make sure that it stays current and stays active. So let's go through each step here a little bit more detail. So the first thing you're going to do is when we talk about our business continuity plan or our disaster response plan, this is going to take time and it's going to take some work. So for those of you on the call, you may be the business owner, you may be the person who would make this decision. So you can check this box. Well, I have management support because I am the manager. For those of you on the call that just needs to go back and say to someone, hey, we need to kind of pull this together, you're just going to want to outline exactly why it's important. And you can give all of the reasons that we just talked about in the first half of this webinar today. And you may need to put some numbers together about what happens, but the reality is you're living in it right now. I think everybody knows, what worked and what didn't work. So you probably don't have to put too much effort into getting that management support to pull this together. And then you're going to want to think about who can work on this. Again, if you're a two-person operation on the call today, this might be you and that other person. But you do want to look around your organization and make sure you pull some people from some different departments that might have a different perspective. So you don't want just managers. You want people from other departments as well. And when you have that team together, the folks that are going to be responsible for that disaster plan, those are the folks that maybe will announce when something is going to happen, or they'll say, hey, it's time to put this plan into place. There's a tornado watch, for example. They're the folks that are also going to monitor it and make sure that it's staying active, and that they're going to also be the ones that test it. So they're not going to create it and then again stick it on a shelf. We want to make sure that this is a live document and we keep it active and we keep it current. Now, here's where we're really going to start getting into the nitty gritty. So you have your folks together, you're sitting around the table. What do we need to have in this? So let's think back when we had to close our doors in the middle of March. What were the mission critical functions in each department that needed to continue? Paying our employees, that's always the first one that pops into people's heads. How will I pay my employees if I cannot get back into the office? I had to close the door and I had to walk out. So you're going to think of all of the mission critical functions at your organization that have to happen in order to keep your organization alive. We're going to gather the policies that you already have in place. So there are things that you probably already have: evacuation procedures, maybe a safety manual that you wrote 10 years ago. Pull that guy back off the shelf and take a look and see what's in there. There was probably a lot of information in there that you haven't thought of in a while. Look at your employee handbook. If you have an employee handbook, you probably have some policies in there that are going to be relevant to this business continuity plan. Snow day policies is a common one that we see. You may have any sort of evacuation policies in there as well. Purchasing information, all of that information, all of your insurance policies, that will all be part of your whole disaster response plan, and any sort of regulatory codes, requirements, that are specific for your industry. And then again, think about if you had to walk out of your office and close the door, what would you need? So critical information, such as banking information, critical phone numbers, employee information, relevant inventory, temporary location information. So here's the big one: remote access instructions. So a lot of folks who, again, had to walk out their door, so many people have been working from home this whole time. And if this was something that we've already done, then this will be part of your disaster response plan. If this is something you never thought of before, you're going to want that to have a part of it now. So it's that access to get online off-site. And that, of course, is critical, as we know. If we didn't know that before, we definitely know it now. And then utility providers, any sort of professional contacts. So your vendors, your suppliers, and then some sort of communication chain. Who calls whom during this disaster. So this, again, will be all information that will be part of your disaster plan. Now, I just want to point out, when we see something like banking information, we get a little scared, like, whoa, we're not going to just put down our account numbers in the middle of a disaster plan. And that's true, you won't, but somebody will need that information. So again, it may be relevant to some departments, but not to others. So the critical people who would need that information should have access to that information. So you want to think about, what do I need if I had to walk out today to do the critical functions of this job? And that's what you want to have handy. So there may be things on this list that I don't have listed today, but would be more specific to your industry. So now we're going to look at our operations. So we just collected a lot of data. Okay, that might be the part that takes a long time. So again, if you don't have a big, large business with all kinds of different departments, this may be simple. There may be just a few processes that you know are critical, and this may not take you a long time. But you want to think about the steps that absolutely must happen in order to fulfill the function. So the person who handles your payroll, they need to be able to process that payroll offsite. And that will be part of the business continuity plan. So, and identify that person who needs to have access to that. What outside entity is critical to this process? When I have here that each department should have their own mini business continuity plan, don't let that seem overwhelming. Really, that just means that there may be a few folks here and there, or a department who's going to need something that nobody else will need. So again, I want everyone to just think back to the middle of March when we all had to walk out or close our doors. What are the things that you wish you could have reached, grabbed a binder, and had all of that critical information that you could have walked out with? Those are the things that you want to have in there. And then I want you to think about the risk. So we already talked about, what are some of the examples of disasters. But when we look at and identify the risks, for those of us on the call who maybe have a maintenance person on staff, or you use an outside maintenance organization, they may be doing some of this internally for you. But these are the risks that we look at when we do safety walkthroughs. We look at all of our physical, our exterior locations, stored materials. Is everything properly marked, free from obstruction? We really should be doing safety walkthroughs anyway. This is all part of looking at our risks, and that should not take too long, depending on the size of your business. And then here again are just the things that we're vulnerable to, and we're vulnerable to all of these. We cannot plan a business continuity plan for each of these. That's not what we do, but we just have to be mindful of the different things that can happen. And then if we want to dig a little deeper, we can think about our risk tolerance. So just for an easy example, if we have to consider our downtime and impact on customers, I just want everyone to think for a minute, how much downtime is acceptable? So think, how long do I want to go without being able to respond to our customers? And if the answer to that question is, well, I don't want to go longer than 24 hours, then it's important to have part of your business continuity plan access to your email and to your computer. So you want that part of your business continuity plan is that offsite access. How long can we go without access to our data? If that's a critical part of your business and you can't go longer than 2 hours, then you want to make sure that you can access that offsite if you needed to. So really, you just want to, think about your risk, think about the things that are going to happen, and think about what's the most probable. Now, when we talk about active shooter trainings, and I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit, that was not relevant. We didn't really talk about that 30 years ago. Now, active shooter trainings are part of many, many businesses, unfortunately. So threats have changed over the years, unfortunately, and so our needs have changed for our business continuity plans. So now we're on step 6. So we're going to start, we've collected all of our data, we've thought about the operations that we need to do, and now we just need to think about, prevention and how to respond to an incident. Again, this is all part of our disaster plan. So we see our guys down there with the plow truck, that's part of their snow day disaster plan, I'm assuming, is that they have a plow truck on call. So we can't prevent everything. That's not the reality. But it is our job to just think about the damage and the disaster once it occurs. And again, our number one priority is for the safety of our employees and our visitors, followed up by preventing any sort of destruction and damage to our building and to our records. So let's think about prevention here for a minute. So again, these are some things that we can do that you may already have in place. If you have a maintenance on staff, if you have an outside maintenance company that handles these things, you can probably check this box pretty quickly. But these are all your typical fundamental preventative steps that you want to make sure are handled in part of your disaster plan. And then you do want to make sure as well that you have these emergency response supplies on hand as well. Now, the reason why we see these things down here is because if we ever needed to shelter in place for a little bit of time, now we think, when would we ever have to do that? Well, hopefully never is the answer to that, right? Not too many of us keep non-perishable foods handy in our office. But the reality is that if there is a tornado, and we do need to hunker down into the lowest level of our building, then these are the types of things that we would have there, and we would hope that we would never ever have to use them. But this is your typical emergency response supplies that you would see on hand. And then our incident responses. So these are examples of our incident responses, and you may have these in place already. And if you do, this will just be part of your business continuity plan. So a lockdown situation, we typically see this for active shooter situations. A tornado. If you look at the back of your door in your office buildings, there's probably a tornado route and a fire evacuation. Again, this is all part of your business continuity plan. You can check that box if those things are already done. We've been doing fire drills since kindergarten, right? So let's just, blow the dust off the fire drill and make sure that we're still doing those types of things. So when we have these lockdowns, tornado drills, fire drills, what should be in those types of plans? Well, first and foremost is, how do we even communicate it? So we want to think about that. Where do we go? Where do we meet? So if in your building, if you have a fire drill, we want to make sure that your employees know where they all should meet for safety. And you want to have a clear chain of authority. So this piece right here is a whole topic that may take some time for you to go through if you haven't already, but this would be just one piece of your business continuity plan. And then, of course, the business continuation. So this is where we're at right now. It is fresh in our mind. We're trying to get our businesses back up and running, and things that we needed to think about. Personnel, where are they going to work? If they're working from home, do they have the equipment and the necessary supplies? Do they have the forms, any documents that they need? Critical information that they need. So, and if all of these things are online and they're saved on a server off-site, and you can go home or somewhere and just pull everything up on the computer, then these are easy fixes for you. For some organizations, that was not the case. So again, what did we learn through COVID-19? Those are the things that need to be fresh in our mind right now that we want to document, and just, if this ever happens again, that we're more prepared for it. And then again, these are all the things that we can think about. Where else can we work? What employees need to be back to work first? We were going through that as businesses started opening up in May and June. We started calling people back. All businesses were doing that. So we're going through this right now. Simple things is, how do we pay our bills? How will we process payroll? Again, this was part of your data collection that we already went through, but this is also going to be part of your business continuation. So it's those critical functions that you would have to do off-site if somebody said, you have to leave today and close the door. So you want to have this in your business continuity plan. how do we interact with the community and our stakeholders? I want us to think about that last bullet there for a minute, because with social media right now, so many businesses were using that to keep all of the folks that follow them online in the loop of what they were doing. At first, it was just well wishes because everything was closed and no one was leaving. We were all in quarantine. Businesses were just keeping active, saying that they wished everybody good health. They couldn't wait to see them again. And then it turned into opening dates, protocols, how they were going to keep everybody safe. And that's kind of where we're at right now. What their hours are, how they're keeping people safe, how they're following everything, and how things are changing. So we're definitely seeing businesses do that right now. They're in the middle of this right now. And now we need to put all of this into a written document. So again, you're going to get all of these slides. And we're going to pull all of this together. Now we think, well, everything's online. I have all that online. But the reality is what if we can't get online? So we need to think about the old-fashioned way of printing things out. So we have to have a printed version in an easy to navigate binder, table of contents, tabs for easy reference, and you're going to have that somewhere where if somebody came in and said, hey, we have to close the doors, you have an hour. We had a couple days notice with COVID, some of us shorter, some of us longer, but you want to be able to pull that out and leave. Now, we may not have any time to grab anything, so we need a copy of this off-site somewhere as well. That would be best case scenario. And again, if there's something specific that different departments need, they would need to have that handy as well. So you think about all of the things that we just talked about. What's the most critical for you, for your business? Every business is different. A lot of those things may not have been relevant to you. Some things may be relevant that we didn't even get a chance to talk about. But you want to have all of that organized into easy reference. You don't want to have to scramble if you're trying to find the procedures, excuse me, for tornado watch. So we want to have that easy reference. So, and then you'll typically see these things in a business continuity plan: emergency call lists, your physical locations. Now, some of this, again, may not be relevant to you, but these are some things that you would see in a large organization's business continuity plan. Insurance summaries. Again, the financial and banking information is definitely critical for those employees that need that. Mutual aid agreements you sometimes see, especially in healthcare. If we think about long-term care facilities, they'll have mutual aid agreements with another long-term care facility so they can transport their residents or their patients to another place. So we see that a lot, and that's definitely part of business continuity plans for healthcare organizations. Any significant vendors and customers and our response supplies. So again, all of the things that are in our documented in our organized tabs, old school binder, and not just online. So when we think about a basic business continuity plan, because we just covered a lot of things, we definitely still want to have, a list of our key contacts, a checklist of our immediate response actions required in the disaster. Who's responsible for what? And I just want to talk about that for a minute, because a lot of times, you'll have someone in a position like the receptionist or a front desk person. They're the ones that are actually responsible for announcing a fire watch or a fire drill or a fire emergency if it's a real thing, or a tornado. That person needs to know exactly what their responsibilities are, and that is all part of your business continuity plan. So we collected all of our information. We have it all documented, and we have it all ready to go, and we're getting ready to communicate it. So we have got to train our employees. Again, if we think about that front desk receptionist who's in charge of announcing these things, that person needs to know exactly what they need to do. We want to train employees, part of their new employee orientation, annually. If anything changes in the operations that changes any sort of plans that we have, they need to know about it. Employees, make it part of your company culture. Safety should always be part of our company culture, but we definitely want our employees to make sure that they're aware of this, their roles, what they need to do in the middle of a disaster, what's the appropriate response, what are the warning and communication procedures. That is critical, that they need to know what they're actually listening for so they know where to go, where to evacuate, where to shelter. And then we need to test that plan. Like I said, we've been having fire drills since kindergarten, so we need to keep on doing those types of things. Tabletop exercises where, the folks who maybe put it all together just sit around the table and literally go over the steps, making sure it makes sense. A walkthrough drill, an evacuation drill, very common for businesses. Full-scale simulation exercises. A lot of cities, townships will do full-scale simulation exercises where the police, the fire departments, the ambulance services all get involved, and businesses will then take part in that. And you'll hear about those on the news. Very effective to really see how would we react in the middle of an emergency. And then again, we need to evaluate and we need to keep our plan updated. We don't want to do it once and then stick it on a shelf. And then we hope we never have to use it. But the reality is even if we never have to use it, we still want to make sure we keep up with the drills and going over it and making it part of our culture for sure. So what are some quick hits? There was a lot of information that we just covered there, and we can go deeper into each of those. And again, I always welcome folks to contact Steve at the SBDC, and we can go over some things in more detail with you. But just some quick hits to walk away from today is do a walkthrough. If you can just go to step 5 and just look at those internal risks, that right there, might make you feel a little bit better about where you're at with your plan, and work on those preventative steps that we talk about in step 6, checking your signage and those types of things, and assess your emergency supplies. When's the last time somebody got a Band-Aid out of the first aid kit? Is there still some Band-Aids in there? So just, assess those types of things. Get that binder ready. If you can at least have a list of your staff and their contact information, vendors, customers, critical customers, utility providers, if you have that, at least get that ready. So again, thinking back to the March when we had to walk out the door, what do you wish that you had in your hand that you could have walked out with? And the other thing is so critical right now is that making sure that your computer files are safe on a server, and we can get those offline or off campus, as I like to say, outside of the building. So those are some things that if you don't have anything in place, that I would recommend starting with and going through right now. I just want to talk about IT disasters just for a minute, because again, we're seeing these a lot. Were we talking about these, 30, 40 years ago? We weren't. So, but server failures, we're seeing so much malicious viruses and, and sabotage and things that are happening here. So we just want to make sure that we stay current with our IT disaster prevention. For those of us on the call, you may use an outside vendor for IT, and that's always wise if you don't have an IT person. And these are just some tips that those folks typically say is just to be consistent with your software, be consistent with your brands, only have one administrator on site that can install updates and software. All of these can cause major disaster for your business. In the Youngstown area, a common thing that we're seeing now from an HR perspective, our emails get hacked and it'll look like it's coming from an employee and it's going to the payroll person. And it says, the payroll person's name is Sally. It'll say, hi, Sally, I want to change my direct deposit. Here's my new account information. And it looks like it's coming from that employee, and all Sally does is fix the direct deposit. Well, now that person's paycheck is now going to the hacker's site. It's so simple, but it's happening everywhere. Here, a couple years ago in the Youngstown area, somebody hacked the owner's email and set up vendors and set up accounts payable, sent it straight to the accounts payable person. It looked like it was coming from the owner, millions of dollars. were stolen just because of fake bills that were coming through. So again, a lot of folks have so many safeguards in place to prevent those things. So it's just another disaster that maybe we didn't always have to think about, that we definitely have to think about now. So we want to make sure that we give IT disasters their own special time to think about. And just some final reminders today. Again, it was a lot of information. I don't want anybody to be overwhelmed. You probably already have some good processes in place. A lot of it may not be relevant to you. Again, if you need any assistance, please reach out to the SBDC. I just want to also say it's better to have some sort of basic plan than no plan at all. If it seemed like that was a lot of information and we can't pull together, again, just think about what you're living through right now with COVID and what you wish you would have had to walk out the doors whenever you had to, and just start there. It's a perfect time to think about what worked and what didn't work, and use this opportunity right now that we're in as a building block to really start your disaster plan. These are the references that I would recommend. FEMA has some great resources on business continuity plans, ready.gov. There's a great book, Faster Disaster Recovery. The Department of Homeland Security, I mentioned active shooter training. They have, I hate to say a good training because none of it is good, but they do have an easy to use training on their website for active shooter training, the run, hide, fight method, which is what the FBI supports. And then the Society for Human Resources Management as well is where I get a lot of my information on this topic. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Steve and see if there are any other questions.
Thanks, Joanna. There are a couple questions. Number one, I don't own my own building, so I don't think I can get a hold of much of that information like shutoff valves, blueprints, etc. Does all that matter for my business continuity plan?
Right, and that would be pretty common because a lot of us just rent our space and we don't know any of that stuff, nor do we have contact to it. So the short answer to that is no. I don't want anybody to get overwhelmed or hung up on all of that and see all those lists and think, oh my gosh, I can't do all of that. That may not matter to you at all because you don't even own your own building. So for those folks who don't own their own building, I would say don't get hung up on that stuff. The only thing you would really want to concern yourself with in terms of the building is your evacuation route. You do want to think about how you can get out of the building and make sure you understand those parts of the building. But no, all of that other stuff, you probably don't even have access to and don't need to worry about it.
Okay, question number two, and I'm looking out the window and it's hard to visualize this, but what is a typical snow day policy for a business?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mentioned snow day policy a couple times, and some folks might have thought, well, what is that? I don't even have that. Some businesses will have a snow day policy for their staff, and what that typically is, if it's inclement weather, whether or not the staff have to come in. And how they would know whether or not to come in. So I would always recommend, if I'm working with clients on their employee handbooks and we get to a piece like this and they want to talk about this, the one thing I would make sure that you have in your inclement weather policy, because again, it could be flooding as well, not just snow, is how it's communicated to employees whether or not to come in. That should be communicated to them. Is it a text message? Is it a phone call? Do you put it on the news? Is it scrolling at the bottom of the news? So there needs to be a consistent method that they know whether or not they should come in. I would think ahead of time what your policy is on paying the employee. Is it just a no pay, no work day? Can they use a PTO day or a vacation day to get paid for that day? Or does the employer just pay them their wages as if they were there? So I would try to have that answer to that question documented and thought about beforehand, so you're not scrambling afterwards to find out. And the other thing, and this may not be relevant to everybody on the call, but for those organizations that have essential staff that have to come in, you want to identify who's essential and who's non-essential. In other words, who needs to come in regardless. assuming it's not a state of emergency blizzard where nobody can come in. So you want to have those essential versus non-essential staff identified in your inclement weather or snow day policy.
Great. And I'll refer to Mike for any questions in the chat room.
Yes, so Joanna, there was a question that said, would you talk about the types of insurance coverages that would be appropriate for disaster planning, and should businesses be claiming losses from COVID?
I'm not comfortable answering that right now, because I think that's still a little bit up in the air as far as the policies. I'll probably have to talk to Steve about that, and we can get back to that person on that answer.
That was it.
Okay. Thank you. Joanna, thank you very, very much. This was great information. Every business should take full advantage of your expertise on this subject. I cannot stress enough to the attendees today that they should take advantage of Joanna's experience in creating and developing their own continuity plan. You would come with a fresh set and objective set of eyes for them as they prepare their own continuity plan. And in addition, for those that are on the call today, Joanna has tremendous background and experience in HR. I think you heard a lot of it today from other references, and I would certainly encourage you to reach out to her for employee handbooks and policies, things of that sort, all relevant to staying on the right side of legal for your employees. So Joanna, thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the attendees for taking time out of your busy schedule. Joanna Pryor had the slide on the August 13th presentation, which will be at 12 p.m. We'll be hosting a session titled Keep Calm and Keep Inventing with Jake Ward. So let me know if our center can be of any assistance to you in the future, and have a great rest of the day.